You showered your grandchildren with letters and gifts. I would send you birthday cards, pick up the phone and call just to hear your voice. When Granddaddy passed, I went to the Motown Museum for my birthday and took a picture in front of a cardboard cutout of the Temptations. When Papa passed, I remember going to the hotel room after leaving the cemetery and turning on the TV. The movie The Temptations was on. I left it on as I fell asleep to the sound of My Girl playing in the background. I was the grandchild that spoke at both of your funerals. It was then you both taught me the value of being an artist, a storyteller. To honor the lives that we live and the journeys that we take. I saw my granddaddy passing in a dream 12 hours before his time came. When my papa passed, suddenly my reality became a dream. Nothing felt real to me. March 13th, a time so bittersweet. My granddaddy's birthday. Just 5 days after his passing. Our birthdays fell exactly 1 week apart, so I'll always feel a special connection to him in my heart. I was the only one in my family who called him Granddaddy. Everyone else, including his 50 or so grandchildren, called him Pops. But he always called us his grandbabies in his charmingly vibrant Louisiana drawl. He was a tall, lean, dark-skinned black man. He could be sweet, but he could also be tough. A real diamond in the rough. April 15th, Tax Day. Papa's birthday. I've noticed the number of pictures I've had of my papa shows him sitting in a chair. My favorite is of him sitting on a couch, holding me shortly after my parents brought me home from the hospital. I instantly knew you were talking to me in the photo because you always loved to talk. And even as a baby, I would always listen. Sometimes I think I inherited your gift to speak with such wisdom. You were a teacher who wanted his grandchildren to succeed. You understood the value of being black, having an education, and a degree. And your enthusiasm made us believe in this dream. My papa would jump through hoops, climb over walls, go out of his way just to put a smile on our faces. At times you would worry how the world would treat us because of our race. As a black man, you knew how cruel this world could sometimes be. My mom and grandmother said my granddaddy was crazy enough to take himself and his drunk friends to go beat up members of the KKK who were harassing the neighborhood. My granddaddy was infamous for cursing people out. When he was mad enough, he wouldn't bite his tongue. He just bit his bottom lip and uttered the words, "Okay, partner," and people knew what time it was. Yet, I don't remember him ever cursing in front of me. For the most part, I always saw his sweet side. I always loved listening to him sing in church. Everybody swore he sounded like Sam Cooke. Exactly like Sam Cooke. I never had to question whether he loved me. I was spoiled till a few of my cousins were green with envy. My favorite gift was this giant pink Barbie car I could drive around in. Mama said he spent all day putting it together. He never even took a break. Both my grandfathers had quite a bit in common. They both loved westerns. They were both army men. They both weren't perfect, but they carried a lot of love in their heart. My papa taught me the value of an education. My granddaddy taught me the value of family. Ever since I was little, I would ask my granddaddy to take me fishing. He said he would, but we never got around to it. I told him we were finally going fishing. We were just fishing for a miracle. We did indeed receive a miracle. It just wasn't the one I was expecting. The doctors didn't think he was going to live long once he ended up in a coma. Once they took him off the machines, he remained alive and breathing on his own for 14 days. He couldn't open his eyes or move his face, but he would raise his hand from time to time to let us know we could hear him. Every day during spring break, I went to the hospital and spent his last 7 days with him. Last time I saw Papa in person was spring break. I had colored my hair a bright blonde. It had been almost 3 years since my last visit. When he saw me, his eyes lit up and he grinned from ear to ear. He embraced me in a warm, bear hug like he always did. I've always preferred women in their natural hair color, but until I saw the way you styled yours, it actually looks pretty nice that way. You snapped a picture of me with your phone and I beamed with pride. I'll never forget how really happy we were that day. The smiles on our faces. 4:06 a.m. The night before he passed, I was the last grandchild to speak to him. I told him to keep holding on, that I wanted him to get better. and that I loved him. When I went to bed, I had a dream of his passing. I was standing in the room. I could hear cries all around me. I saw Granddaddy open his eyes and look straight at me. Granddaddy passed at 4:06 p.m. Only 2 of my uncles were in the room at the time he passed. They said he finally opened his eyes and he took one last look around the room before his spirit left his body. I prayed to God for my papa's healing, but I told him that more than anything, I wanted him to be at peace. Love is more significant than presence. I wept. I slept. Inhale, exhale. I don't know the exact moment you left. I just remember the phone ringing. I just remember you were at peace in my calm before the storm. I just remember my heart screaming, erupting like a volcano. I remember my face being on fire and water rolling down my cheeks. I remember my mother holding my brother and me. The time in her arms felt like an eternity. I didn't want to leave. Suddenly, my reality became a dream. Nothing felt real to me. Each month, you would send us letters and gifts. I still remember the last one you sent. The letter was blank. I felt my heart sink. I picked up the phone just to hear your voice. I could tell you were happy to hear from me, but at the same time, you sounded 1,000,000 miles away.
Grief to me is very multidimensional. I feel like it's difficult to describe it with just a couple of words. There's depth to it. I feel like there's also shallowness to it. There are fragments. It comes in waves as well. It's not just like a certain amount of time and then it disappears. It ebbs and flows over time, I feel, and can present itself in, the obvious ways that we think of grief, of sadness and longing and missing. But I think it can also come in waves of joy and remembrance. When, as an adult, I can reflect back and think of my childhood and think of how I interact with children as an adult, and there is so much wonder in children. I loved exploring as a child. We did a lot of camping, spelunking. My grandparents' farm, they bought the farm back in 50s, 60s, somewhere in there. And so the farm was our playground. Like my cousins and I, there were 6 of us, and the farm really represented us exploring and wondering about things, right? And wandering and being able to just be turned loose and go do whatever we wanted to do. Sometimes it feels the strings feel very, the thread feels very, like individual, like they're just coming out like this, like a singular thread. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But then there's other times it feels like a web, right? But an organized web. But then there's other times it feels very, I think in the process of losing a loved one, our lives change because we used to have this person who was there, and now it's space. Other times the threads go really far out. And when they do that, I definitely feel more stressed with them. And as they come back, I feel there's more comfort that I feel when the threads are smaller and not as spread out from my body. because of the empty space, it then changes the way we interact with the world, I feel. And I was thinking about that this morning, actually, like specifically with my grandmother. She's physically not here. And I was living a couple of states away from her for most of my life, most of my adult life. But it's the knowing that she's not physically on this planet, right? That creates that hole. And then how am I supposed to interact with the planet with this hole being here, right? Sometimes they felt suffocating. And other times they've driven me to create. In creating gives me a chance to honor my elders. It gives me a chance to honor the paths that they walked and to honor what they handed down to me and to honor our family or to honor my friends, for my friends who have passed. And so I think I look at that not as an avoidance, but more as how can I honor them and their lives that they led, the effect that they had on me, and so that they are remembered. I've had prophetic dreams, and they come and go. And so when my grandmother had passed, I immediately started having these dreams of tattoos, actually, and they were centered around my arms. And I felt sometimes like I was outside my body, looking down. So I couldn't see my head or my shoulders, but it's almost like I was outside my body, but seeing this visualization of the fogginess around my arms. And the images that came were definitely images from the farm and things that my grandparents had built for us, and those memories of being a child of wonder on the farm, right? And how I explored the farm solo and with my cousins. But having a sensation of looking at things through clouds, sheath. Not quite a year after, but I met with Mandy and I told her all this stuff. I was like, hey, so I had this dream. I've multiple times, like it just keeps coming back. I don't see these images specifically, so I can't give you a specific image. But what I can give you is it's masculine, it's feminine. On the masculine side, I feel these things. On the feminine side, I feel these things. These are the colors that have come to me in through these images. And so she took that and a little bit later sends me proofs, and I was just like, oh my God, I'm not a visual artist, and so I don't know what it's like to take the words that somebody says and to encapsulate them into an image. But it was beautiful. Like, I lost it. I just couldn't believe that, like that was exactly the same feeling when I saw those is the same feeling I had with the dreams. I still haven't had a dream that they're revealed, though. For my grandmother, for her burial, we bathed her in rose water and then wrapped her in a white sheath. And we don't cover her face, but we left her face open. Anyway, that just came to mind when we went through that whole process when she passed away.
How would you define grief and wonder?
I think a lot of my experience with it comes from the work that Francis Weller has synthesized. He talks about grief being a threshold emotion and the idea that we're in a flatline culture and that the greater the joy, the greater the grief, and vice versa. And so I think wonder is definitely a part of grief and joy as well. I think that they're all kind of interconnected. And one of my mentors, Donna Halit, who does regenerative grief coaching, kind of talks about, it's like we understand them, so grief and love or grief and wonder as these polar, like binary dualities, when actually I think they're kind of the same, an expression of the same spectrum. Like sometimes I think my experience of grief can be like I'm holding my face down over my paper or into my pillow, like alone, but in going further into it, you kind of get this expansiveness where you might be floating up and you kind of see this bird's eye view. And that's to me where the wonder comes in, where it's like these synchronistic things might happen. For example, like, I was going out to play my accordion in the snow to do this, song in honor of my grandpa. I was bringing in some type of creative element that I knew, or nature connection that I wanted. And in doing so, this synchronistic thing happened and a lot of other people were passing by and thinking, wow, what a beautiful thing. And they didn't know why I was doing it necessarily, but it resonated with them. It like spoke to them. And that's like another type of wonder, I think. Like if you see someone really engaging in the work, because I'm all about like death and life. I'm all about death and sex. Like your entry into the world, your exit into the world, the creative energy that you can embody and alchemize and play with, and all that is hard about that at the same time, especially like in the current state of the world with the climate crisis. Like I think the losses of the world, I think is the name of that gateway, is a really strong one that people can tap into. And then in processing that, you get to process your other things too. The type of rituals that I engage in, the community grief rituals, are of the Dagara tribe tradition, which was brought to the West by Sabang Fusome. So just want to give a shout out that Francis Weller, practiced and studied with them. So the Dagara tribe from Burkina Faso, the way that they do traditions of grief is that in this like network of villages, there's kind of always some type of grief ritual going on. And I really love that. When grief starts to move through you, could be your own grief, could be something collective. You don't know why, but you have to cross the threshold to go to the altar. And there you will kneel or whatever you need to do, weep, sit in silence, move, anything. And then someone will be called to be with you. So you have a support person. But the best part, in my opinion, of those grief rituals, they go on for several hours, sometimes a full day, is when you come back to the village. Everybody welcomes you smiling and hugging, and they say thank you for your tears. I value those tears so much. Like when I cry, having spent many years of shutting that down, I'm like, oh my gosh, good job, I did it. Like, I think Martine Prechtel says that unwept tears for 3 generations manifest into tumors. And I really feel that. There's also this quote that keeps coming to mind, which isn't directly related, but that people not initiated into the village will burn it down. And I think there's a lack of initiation into our communities if we're not allowing ourselves to fully grieve and recognize our interconnectedness. I had this really amazing grief ritual experience, and it was led by Azul Valerie Tomei, who's another great grief practitioner. And I remember being really blown away because there was a few men there, and it was a very intimate circle. And usually these circles are attended mostly by women. And what kind of happened as a result of this circle was, I think the men that were there were a little bit hesitant to fully embody their own expressions of grief because those tend to be more angry. And I think that what was coming up for them was also grief about the way that they had felt like they were unable to express the soft parts of themselves, the angry parts of themselves, their sensuality, their dynamic pieces of life. Just being able to hear men's voices among the women who were crying, because usually it's always the women that are crying. And sometimes it sounds like yelling, and that's okay. And it really brought home for me this idea that we really desperately need each other. I think at a certain point, when you've experienced so much heaviness and loss of so many kinds, as some of us are chosen and called to do, you reach a point of needing to make a choice of how you want to process and transmute this experience. And I think for me, I just keep having this metaphor that comes to mind of the forces that are needed to create a diamond are very strong. And I'm sure a lot of diamonds aren't made. And I felt like for me, the choice was either to just be completely destroyed and disappear, or to allow them to impact me in such a way that I could become a healing vessel both for myself and also that kind of like righteous fire that then goes out into the world and can ignite and yeah, join people with this like sacred song that I seem to be singing.
So El Vegan is called the Path of Death, and that's what the song is called. And it's the way when the souls cross over to Valhalla. And they used to have songs for people, when they died. But this song is about how who's gonna sing that song for me when I die, and in so doing the song, that becomes the song. So. I like one of the lyrics is like, cattle and kinsmen will die, but words will never die. So it's like a way to keep this tradition going. And I actually found out about this song when my grandpa was dying in the hospital, and he's of Swedish descent, and this is a Norwegian song, so it's kind of in the same boat there. But I like didn't know what it was about, but like I was just like singing it in the hospital, you know, to like help him. And then later on, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like literally what that song is for. So anyway, yeah, that's what that is.